3. Changing traditions. The three orders. Changing cultural traditions. Confrontation of cultures. Changing traditions. We have seen how, by the 9th century, large parts of Asia witnessed the growth and expansion of great empires, some nomadic, some based on well-developed cities and trading networks that centered on them. The difference between the Macedonian, Roman, and Arab empires and the ones that precede them, the Egyptian, Assyrian, Chinese, Moran, was that they covered greater areas of territory and were continental or transcontinental in nature. The Mongol Empire was similar. Different cultural encounters were crucial to what took place. The arrival of empires was almost always sudden, but they were almost always the result of changes that had been taking place over a long time in the core of what would become an empire. Traditions in world history could change in different ways. In Western Europe during the period from the 9th to 17th centuries, much that we connect with modern times evolved slowly. The development of scientific knowledge based on experiment rather than religious belief. Serious thought about the organization of government with attention to the creation of civil services, parliaments and different codes of law, improvements in technology that was used in industry and agriculture. The consequences of these changes could be felt with great force outside Europe. As we have seen by the 5th century CE, the Roman Empire in the West had disintegrated. In Western and Central Europe, the remains of the Roman Empire were slowly adapted to the administrative requirements and needs of tribes that had established kingdoms there. However, urban centers were smaller in Western Europe than farther east. By the 9th century, the commercial and urban centers, Aix, London, Rome, Siena, though small, could not be dismissed. From the 9th to the 11th centuries, there were major developments in the countryside in Western Europe. The church and royal government developed a combination of Roman institution with the customary rules of tribes. The finest example was the Emperor of Charlemagne in Western and Central Europe at the beginning of 9th century. Even after its rapid collapse, urban centers and trading networks persisted, albeit under heavy attack from Hungarians, Vikings and others. What happened was called feudalism. Feudalism was marked by agricultural production around castle and manor houses, where lords of the manor possessed land that was cultivated by peasant serfs who placed them loyalty, goods and services. These lords in turn placed their loyalty to greater lords who were vassals of kings. The Catholic Church, centered on the papacy, supported the state of affairs and itself possessed land in a world where uncertainties of life, poor sense of medicine, and low life expectancy were common. The Church showed people how to behave so that life after death at least would be tolerable. Monasteries were created where God-fearing people could devote themselves to the service of God in the way Catholic churchmen thought fit. Equally, churches were part of a network of scholarship that ran from the Muslim states of Spain to Byzantium, and they provided the petty kings of Europe with a sense of the opulence of the eastern Mediterranean and beyond. The influence of commerce and town in the feudal order came to evolve and change encouraged by Mediterranean entrepreneurs in Venice and Genoa from the 12th century. Their ships carried on a growing trade with Muslim states and the remain of the Roman Empire in the east. Attached by the lure of wealth in these areas and inspired by the idea of freeing holy places associated with crest from Muslim European kings reinforced links across the Mediterranean Crusades. During the Crusades, trade within Europe improved, centered on fairs and the port cities of the Baltic Sea and the North Sea, and stimulated by a growing population. The Palace of Popes in Avignon, a 14th century town in South France. The Palace of Doge in Venice in 15th century. Opportunities for commercial expansion coincide with changing attitudes concerning the value of life, respect for human beings, and living things that marked much of Islamic art and literature, and the example of Greek art and ideas that came to Europe from Byzantine trade encouraged Europeans to take a new look at the world, and from the 14th century in what is called the Renaissance. Especially in North Italian towns, the wealthy becomes less concerned with life after death and more with the wonders of life itself. Sculptors, painters, and writers become interested in humanity and the discovery of the world. By the end of the 15th century, this state of affairs encouraged travel and discovery as never before. Voyages of discovery took place. Spaniards and Portuguese, who had traded with northern Africa, pushed further down the coast of western Africa, finally leading to journeys around the Cape of Good Hope to India, which had a great reputation in Europe as a source of spices that were in great demand. Columbus attempted to find a western route to India and in 1492 reached the island which the Europeans called the West Indies. Other explorers tried to find the northern route to India and China via the Arctic. European travelers encountered a range of different peoples in the course of their journey. In fact, they were interested in learning from them. The papacy encouraged the work of the North African geographer and traveler Hassan al-Wajjan, later known in Europe as Leo Africanus, who wrote the first geography of Africa in the early 16th century for Pope Leo X. Jesuit churchman observed and wrote on Japan in the 16th century, and Englishman Will Adams became a friend and counselor of the Japanese shogun Tokugawa Ieyasu in the early 17th century. As in the case of Hassan al-Wajjan, peoples that the Europeans encountered in the Americans often took a great interest in them and sometimes worked for them. For example, an Aztec woman, later known as Dona Marina, befriended the Spanish conqueror of Mexico, Cortes, and interpreted and negotiated for him. In their encounters, Europeans were sometimes cautious, self-effacing and observant, even as they frequently attempted to establish trade monopolies and enforce their authority by force of arms as the Portuguese attempted to do in the Indian Ocean after Vasco da Gama's arrival in Calicut, present-day Kozhikode in 1498. In other causes, in other cases, they were overbearing, aggressive, and cruel and adopted an attitude of superiority to those they met. Considering such people ignorant, the Catholic Church encouraged both attitudes. The church was the center for the study of other cultures and languages, but encouraged attack on people it saw as unchristian. From the point of view of non-European, the encounter with Europe varied. For much of the Islamic lands and India and China, though Europeans remained a curiosity until the end of the 17th century. They were perceived as hardy traders and seamen who had little to contribute to their sense of the larger world. The Japanese learned some of the advantages of European technology quickly. For instance, they had begun large-scale production of muskets by the late 16th century, and the Americans, enemies of the Aztec Empire, sometimes used Europeans to challenge the power of the Aztecs. At the same time, the diseases the Europeans brought devastated the population, leading to the death of over 90% of the people in some areas by the end of the 16th century.